Hey guys, I haven't put out a how-to video in a little while. Um, Not since refining your process, or I think I did one on doing belt loops. But at any rate, not this channel is expanding a lot faster than I thought it would. I can't even really keep up with it at this point. I used to get like 1 or 2 subscribers a day, and that was like, wow, that's really awesome. But now it's possible to get like 10 a day, and I can barely keep up with that. I mean, I thought I was going to have 100 subscribers by the end of the month. That would be like a really optimistic estimate. No, it's like past 160, and I can't really. I'm kind of flabbergasted by that. So anyway, many of you may have gotten the bulletin on. I had intended to do a 100 subscriber holster giveaway, but we passed 100 subscribers much more quickly than I had expected to. So what I'm going to do is, I don't want to break my promise, but I'm going to have to push it to 200 subscriber giveaway. So the day that I get this 200th subscriber, I will draw the names out of the hat for those of you who submit what holster you want to me. I mean, it's not going to be like a big, extravagant, light-bearing holster. It's going to be a like modest concealment style holster, because that's about all I can really afford to give away at this point in terms of like time and resources and materials. I mean, not that the material is like all that much, but I might need to save it for like another paid order. You guys understand, I'm sure. But at any rate, yeah, it's going to be awesome. I'm not going to hook you up with some crap. You know what you get here, but it won't be, uber tactical, huge light bearing triple, quadruple mag carrier or anything. It's going to be, a modest concealment style holster. Possibly a new design, an experimental design. So at any rate, anyway, yeah, submit either PM or comments or whatever, however you want to get the message to me, the gun that you have that you'd like to throw your name in the hat for. And on the day I get the 200th subscriber, that evening, I'll pull the names out of the hat on camera and then get started on your project. So anyway, now we get down to business here. Let's get down to business, right? I've been getting a lot of great emails from people with some fantastic questions, like intrepid individuals who have started using the videos they found on this channel to get started on their project. And so I addressed a lot of these finer issues in refining your process, annotated here. But I wanted to do another one on an issue that I wound up actually writing a really long long email to one of my subscribers about retention and different retention strategies. Now, retention is the sort of thing that can be kind of hard to fine-tune on some of these holsters. It's easy to overdo it. It's easy to get caught up in some of the machining of the pistol, etc., etc. It's kind of hard to find the right balance between speed and retention. But aside from all of those things, because there's a lot of like personal preference as far as retention goes. But just to get you started, we're going to discuss what I found to be the two primary methods of retention, just from the experience that I've been having here. Right now, those two methods of retention are entrapment and friction, and I've got an example of each right here. Entrapment occurs when you have a wide feature of the object, like the gun, for instance, held in place, held in the holster by a narrow feature of the holster. Now, that might sound a little complex, but basically, here's what we'll talk about, right? If I make the Kydex here closer together than the trigger guard, I'm going to trap the gun in the holster. Right? That's pretty straightforward. So if the trigger guard is this thick, and then I proceed to make this area of the Kydex thinner than that, or closer together, as you can see here, you see here where it gets snug and dips in. Let's talk about it like geography, right? We'll have like a valley or a lower region holding in a higher region, and we're not using friction to hold the gun in the holster. I mean, we can use a little bit. I mean, and it's always nice to have a little bit of friction so that the gun itself doesn't rattle around in the holster, and so it fits in nice and snug and it stays quiet. But primarily what's holding it in is just that you've reduced the altitude of this little portion relative to the trigger guard. And you can do that with anything that has a substantial height difference across the surface of the holster. Now you might notice when you do like a light bearing holster, those of you who have been intrepid enough to do that here, I'll grab a light real quick. You can see that the light will be geographically the tallest feature on that face of the holster, so that when you mold it, the entrapment that occurs is insurmountable for the light. It will, if it's lower, if it's as low as the trigger guard, because the Kydex will press in here. If it gets that low there, this will never come out. So obviously you have to relieve it. You have to relieve that differential there. And additionally, there are other features that you may need to relieve. For instance, anything with a sharp machined edge can start to create some unintended retention, as it's much more likely for the gun to scratch the Kydex than the Kydex to scratch the gun. Especially when you encounter some sharper, more angular elements of the gun. What'll happen is, if you don't relieve them properly, such that you maintain good definition, because part of the appeal of this is how good looking the holster can be with the right definition. But you also have to be careful, because, I mean, you can see here that, I mean, this is just from when I was testing it. This is my personal holster. The slide release, the metal of the slide release started to scratch the Kydex there, and that'll cause a burr. And over time, that burr, have you ever tried to stop a car on gravel, and the gravel bunches up in front of the wheels and creates like a little mound? That'll happen inside the holster, and then what'll happen is one day is that will be really built up. You'll go and insert the gun. For instance, it happens really frequently here on the ejection port, that you'll put the gun in and out of the holster a few times, and then one day that little burr will build up, and you'll have to like really yank it to get it out, and then you'll get a scratch down your gun. So I always make it a point. Let's see if I can highlight it on this camo holster. You might be able to see that in this area I relieve entirely the ejection port, so that way I don't get a buildup of burring plastic inside the holster. So that is entrapment. And you can use any feature of any object. I mean, like some polymer magazines have a really dynamic surface texture. Like a PMag has all those ribs on it. You can, if they're tall enough, or some Tapco AK mags will have a really significant surface ribbing for her pleasure, right? No. Anyway, they'll have like an aggressive surface, and that might have enough altitude to entrap it, and you can have a combination of friction and entrapment and that sort of thing. But typically, guns, something like handcuffs, will have enough of a altitude change throughout the terrain of the holster that you can use just entrapment to secure them. So I'm going to put this guy away. And next we're going to talk about friction. You can use friction. I mean, for instance, let's look at this. There's not a lot of significant geography on this magazine. Yeah, you can get this little notch here, but honestly, you're going to run into the same problem like with the ejection port, where if you try to depend on this notch as a point of entrapment and retention, you're just going to wind up shredding the plastic. It's going to turn it into a burr, and then eventually you'll wear it out, and you'll you'll have to shake the plastic out of your mag carrier every time you want to use it. So what you want to depend on for something like this, for this or a baton or spray or some flashlight, some slicker flashlights, you might need to depend on friction. Now friction occurs when, say I make a mold of this, right? The Kydex will mold to it perfectly, and this will wind up being the Kydex won't get any tighter than the magazine. When you press it down around the magazine, that's going to be, the dimensions of the holster. But what you can see here is that in order to attain the retention, I spot heat this area. Not only do I give it a little lip flaring out to ease reinsertion or drawing, but I also at the same time use my thumb and just press in ever so slightly. We're talking like 1/8 of an inch here, just in this one little area, right? To create a dimension inside the holster that is narrower than the magazine itself. So that winds up creating a situation where the magazine has to sort of overcome and stretch ever so slightly or press against the Kydex in order to be inserted into the holster. And it winds up being very tight. Now we're not entrapping any feature of this holster. We're not of this magazine. We're not molding it so tightly that we're getting down into these the little round counting windows on the magazine. We're just making it a little bit snugger there, and it's easy to fine tune that. You can fine tune it endlessly, and if you order one of these from me, obviously you can heat it with a hairdryer and work it a little bit until it's just right. But it's not like this you're not depending on any of this definition on the holster to retain the magazine. You're doing it by just reducing that dimension ever so slightly in there. I wonder if we can get a good look at that. Yeah, maybe you can see how it just dips, how it presses in ever so slightly there. I guess it's hard to see, black on black. But at any rate, yeah, those are the two methods of retention. And you can work them just with a little bit of spot heating to achieve the results that you want with your holsters. And yeah, just take advantage of whatever features your particular project possesses, and work with them to achieve the retention that you want. It's possible to use a combination of both. I mean, it's nice to have a little bit of friction on the slide, as well as a nice positive lock on the trigger guard. And work with it however you want, and make sure that you check it frequently, because as you do things like maybe you want to put a little curve into the body of the holster, that's going to change the friction retention properties of the holster. So check often, check frequently. It's nice to blue tape up the gun while you're working on it, so you can continue to check without any of the debris and particulate matters from the working process getting involved in the finish on your gun, as well as make sure that it increases ever so fractionally the dimensions of the gun, so that once you get a nice retention and you remove the tape, it'll be even a little smoother, because you're actually fractionally shrinking the size of the gun. Anyway, by removing the tape is what I mean. It adds dimension to the gun. So, at any rate, I hope you guys found that helpful, and good luck with the rest of your projects.